Hi everybody, Dacob here. Welcome back to my channel. I've just come from the Dr. Sleep premiere. There you have it. I was seated center orchestra, row D, seat 105. As you can see, big fan of Kubrick, big fan of The Shining. I even have the Grady twins here in my pocket. As a person who has watched The Shining, gosh, I don't even know the number anymore. I mean, of times, 30, 40 throughout the decades. I knew that there was nothing to expect, really, because Kubrick is no longer with us, unfortunately. So, but the second I saw the visuals, pop up from the trailers that were coming out, I kind of understood that there will be, or that there would be very direct references to Kubrick's Shining rather than to Stephen King's Shining. And as we all know, there is a difference between the Shining book and Stanley Kubrick's Shining movie in terms of plot lines. Now, this particular review of the movie, I've just been to the world premiere of it, so it's very fresh. Let's just say it's spoiler-free up to a certain point, and when we get into spoilers, I shall announce it, so you all can enjoy spoiler-free territory for now. For those of you who have read The Shining or watched the movie The Shining, at this point, what can we spoil about The Shining? Nothing really. Most of us moviegoers or lovers of any sort of quality in film know The Shining, have watched The Shining. So there's not much to spoil there. But anyway, for Dr. Sleep, different scenario. If it's based on the Dr. Sleep book by Stephen King, and yet it references Kubrick's Shining, which is different from King's Shining in many ways. The feeling that I have, and this is just perhaps you could call it first impressions after that I've watched the movie, the feeling that I have is of deep sadness. There's so much to say about this. I mean, I love Shelley Duvall so much. I'm a huge fan of Shelley Duvall. The fact that she is not doing well, the fact that, a lot has changed in her life, and the fact that also Kubrick messed her up quite a bit during the shoot of The Shining, has a sadness to it. The fact that Jack Nicholson has retired, is no longer acting. The fact that Danny, who actually acted as Danny in the movie, stopped acting, child actor after that movie, didn't pursue the career of acting. It kind of, the Overlook Hotel, for best or for worse, messed up a lot of things in real life and also in film. On film, in terms of the plot line, Stanley Kubrick's film is a masterpiece, and I just love it. It's so magnetic. It's mesmerizing. Every time I start watching it, I cannot stop until the movie's over. It was sad to watch Dr. Sleep because of the memory I have of The Shining and knowing where all of the actors actually are today, which position in their lives they are in today or at today, makes you feel like there's a sadness to it just at the core. So whether or not you watch the movie, you think about the lives of these people, and The Shining came out in 1980, and here we are in 2019, almost 2020. So many decades have passed. So there's a sadness to it, to the fact that something so beautiful has ended, and to the fact that Stanley Kubrick is no longer with us, and we will never get such depth and such incredible images, visuals, stories, writing, photography, casting, directing, what have you. He was an all-round genius when it comes to film. So I went into Dr. Sleep without many expectations. However, because in the trailer I was given these visuals that were directly referencing or copying one-to-one Kubrick, I thought, okay, well, this director, what's his name? Mike Flanagan, he is really going for it. Okay, you wanna go into that territory to mess with Kubrick? And by messing with Kubrick, I mean if you're gonna reference something so huge as Kubrick, you know already you're gonna fail. You're setting yourself up for failure, because I'm not saying that there's nobody who could ever one day in the future reach the height of Kubrick. Probably there is, and there's going to be other things in the future, and other people, and other minds, and other creative geniuses. But if you're really going to play with the visuals and with the aesthetic and with also the casting, the type of casting, because Mike took actors that look like Shelley Duvall and Jack Nicholson, or also Danny, but if you're going to go there, then you're setting yourself up for failure, because there's no way that you could make it better than Kubrick has. The same movie. Now, of course, we're not talking about the same movie. This is the continuation of the movie, but every time there's a reference to Kubrick's Shining, we're catapulted back into attention to detail that Kubrick had, but with a quicker pace. You can see that this movie was shot much quicker. You know, Kubrick had the privilege of having carte blanche from Warner Brothers to shoot no matter how long he wanted and how much he wanted. Nobody else has that privilege today. So obviously, and Warner Brothers did distribute The Shining. Warner Brothers is also distributing Dr. Sleep. So I kind of blame them as well for the lack of quality in certain ways of this movie, because, you know, if they want to call in another director to shoot the continuation of The Shining, and they already have in their pocket the original Shining, then invest in it, make it really work. This felt speeded up, done in a way that did not convey at all the quality that we're used to from The Shining. The actress that portrays Shelley Duvall's character, Wendy Torrance, bless her, she's really sweet. I don't know her name. Anyway, she was there at the premiere. I passed by her after coming out of the screening room. She's quite tall. I'm really surprised to see how tall she is. She nailed Shelley Duvall's voice, but it did feel perhaps a little bit like too much of an actor / character study that this actress did. So, you know, Shelley Duvall, I consider Shelley Duvall to be extremely beautiful, but she's not a canonic type of beauty. She's a very particular type of beauty. This other actress, she in her eyes, she has that twinkle of sadness that Shelley Duvall also has, but she's more standard beautiful. She has, you know, very proportionate. The teeth are not too long. The mouth, everything just sits graciously there. With Shelley, there's a tension in her beauty, which creates so much of the magic. So this actress kind of felt like she did a character study on Shelley / Wendy. Whenever she would call Danny out, you know, Danny, when she would be nervous looking for her kid, it was like listening, it was like hearing Shelley, but then when you see her, it was like seeing almost somebody dressing up for Halloween, you know, as Wendy Torrance. So that kind of kicks you out when you see it. And then, of course, the actor that was cast to portray Jack Nicholson's character, that was awkward. That did not work at all for me. And I have the feeling at one point in the movie, this is again without spoilers, I have the feeling that they did play some CGI tricks with his face to make him look a little bit more like Jack Nicholson. I don't know. Anyway, now we're entering spoiler territory. So you have been warned. Spoilers begin. 3, 2, 1. Now, Ewan McGregor, who I love as an actor, he's very charismatic, conveys always a lot of emotions. There's something very gentle about him. And I think casting him as a grown-up Danny was a good choice. it worked. There's something very gracious about him and sympathetic, and you just feel with him and for him. He, at one point, he's an alcoholic in this movie, and he's battling his own ghosts and demons. He pulls himself out of the gutter, if you may, at one point, and goes to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting and meets a doctor there. Well, I guess he's a doctor. And this guy, so he kind of sees this guy, he talks to this guy after the meeting, and he sees that this guy's touching his wrist. And then we notice that Danny actually not only has the shining in terms of communicating without really talking and seeing things, he can also identify, according to the moment of a certain person, what has happened to them in the short past. So because this guy touched his wrist, Danny noticed that he lost his watch, and Danny came to him at the end of the meeting and said, hey, you lost your watch there, and then in that moment, go there and you're going to find your watch, And so this guy goes, oh my God, come to my office tomorrow. Let's talk. I might give you a job, because Danny's struggling with alcoholism. He wants to pull himself together and get a job, get his life together. So, and then what happens is we are in the office of this character. But what did Mike Flanagan do? He rebuilt completely the office in which Jack Torrance has his meeting, his colloquium for the job at the Overlook Hotel at the beginning of the movie of The Shining. So, but we're not in the Overlook Hotel. But for some awkward reason, they decided to copy the Overlook Hotel's office in which Jack Torrance had his meeting, one-to-one, literally, even the little paintings, photos, or posters on the wall, even the movement of this guy who has lost his watch and then found it, the way that everything was one-to-one taken from the Overlook Hotel. I don't know why would they do that. But so, and then of course, Danny's character is in Jack Torrance's position. And they even, you could see that Ewan copied Jack Nicholson's movement. He was probably told to do so. Again, felt a little bit like a character study. Didn't need to happen. So these little tweaks and twerks, of course, are leading up to something that's going to happen at the end of the movie when Danny does go back to the Overlook Hotel. And the Overlook Hotel is in such disrepair because it has been shut down after what had happened the last time. Grady killed his twin daughters, and then after that, Torrance tried to kill his wife and son. So after that, the hotel shut down in Stephen King's book. So when Danny returns, and we're going to get to the reasons why he returns to it. When he returns, that was the moment in which I felt interesting. I really felt like we're going back. Here's the real homage. Here's the sad homage to Stanley Kubrick. Sad in a good way in this case, because it really felt like they're back on the sets that Kubrick used in London. They were not, I guess, on the same sets, but I mean, in the same location, the same studio or sound studio that Kubrick shot in London. Well, maybe they were, but I don't think they were, because at the end of the movie, we saw all the locations cited, and Georgia was the main country, the main state cited for tax rebate that was given to them for shooting. So anyway, that was a moment when there was a sadness to it, this rundown hotel, but everything was rebuilt with attention to detail / love, I guess, too, because obviously if you put a lot of attention to detail, that means that you are in love with the actual material you were working with, and that was Kubrick's Overlook Hotel interior design. And as Danny walks through all the corridors and revisits all those places that we remember from the original Shining, that's powerful. That was powerful. But then the second we go into the characters and into the ghosts that were haunting Jack Torrance and how they were cast, they look like caricatures of the original version of The Shining. And this, again, I guess was due to lack of time for filming, because again, Kubrick had all the time in the world to film as long as he wanted to. you could feel that this movie was like done without having all that time, and you need that time to dig deep into the psychology and to develop a new language to communicate certain frustrations, fears, and psychology without necessarily using words. And this is where Kubrick was a genius at, but he needed that time. He needed to do 50 takes per scene because he was looking for that magic that would, through a twitch of an eye or just the movement of the face of the body together with other constellations within the framing of the picture, would convey a certain magic. And that magic can only happen, if you want the quality of Kubrick, it can only happen if you have endless amount of takes at your disposition and you can just go for it until you reach that purity, that pureness. Because The Shining flows so pure, it's so effortless. But you know, so much work went into it, but it feels so effortless when you watch it. Doctor Sleep feels rushed in that respect. On top of that, you know, The Shining, Kubrick's movie, is a perfect example of how a movie can outdo a book. It's very rare. It happens very rarely. But in the case of The Shining, Kubrick's movie is far better than Stephen King's book. Now, of course, everything, you know, it's just my opinion. Somebody might prefer the book to the movie, and not only do I believe that it's better than the book, the way The Shining ends with Wendy and Danny just escaping in that bobcat, whatever it's called, snow machine, driving into the mist and into the fog, and then just disappearing into it, and then we see Jack frozen after that. There's a beauty to this infinite potential. I mean, it's an ending that just doesn't have an end, really. Then we zoom into the image of 1921, and we see Mr. Torrance. He has always been in the Overlook Hotel. The Overlook Hotel took him, his spirit, his ghost, and now he's a part of that hotel forever. But he keeps mentioning in the movie that he feels like he's always been there. The Grady twins also always keep repeating forever and ever and ever. I have them here, by the way. They're also saying, come play with us forever and ever and ever. So it's an endless type of loop. The second The Shining ends, you want to initiate it again. However, the second The Shining ends, you don't want to read the continuation of The Shining in another book entitled Doctor Sleep. In Doctor Sleep, the main character we think is Danny, but actually it's the little girl that starts communicating with him, because apparently she has an even more powerful shine or shining to her than he does. Since we're not in the Overlook Hotel anymore, because after Danny escaped with his mother from the Overlook Hotel, they moved to Florida where there's no snow, because they just thought they would never want to see or experience snow again in their lives. We see Danny grow up, become a man, and later on in the movie he mentions he mentions how it was for him to lose his mother. So towards the end of the movie, we realize, okay, Danny does not have a father anymore because he died in The Shining, and Danny doesn't have a mother anymore either. But there's another little girl from another family that has The Shining that starts to communicate with him. Since they're not in the hotel, as I mentioned, because he moved away to Florida, the hotel was shut down. Who is the enemy? Who is the bad guy? Who is the nemesis in this movie? And this is where things get tacky. The elegance that we have of Kubrick is completely gone. We have this bunch of vampire sucking creatures that instead of drinking human blood, they suck human energy out of them, or their or their shine, or the dust, or whatever you want to call it, when these people are afraid, when they have fear, when they have pain and fear. So basically these creatures that have human form on the outside, they thrive and live off of fear of others and pain of others, and they inflict the pain and the fear by slowly killing people, and as they kill you, your essence flows out of you and they suck it up. So, but these vampire type of creatures are hunting down humans that have The Shining because they have particularly powerful energy, and the more energy a human has, the more of The Shining energy a human has, and the more these vampires get to suck it, right? So these are the bad guys, and the casting for them was not the best. The costumes were just really tacky, poorly done, poorly selected. Not a lot of attention to detail went into it. Um, and then we have this kind of always these time jumps. Danny as a boy, then he's grown up, then this other little girl who comes into the picture, and then she is first a little kid, and then next scene she's grown up because 8 years or 11 years pass, and now we're all of a sudden in 2011 or 12 or 13. And the only really cool casting was Mr. Stroiken. I never know how to pronounce his name, but he is the giant or the fireman from Twin Peaks. He is one of these vampire creatures. He's the grandpa. So that was kind of cool because we already are used to him as being this sort of supernatural entity. It's amazing to see him again. Spoiler alert, he does pass away, and it's really sad to see him die because I always connect to Twin Peaks, but that's a whole other can of worms. Anyway, the movie ends with Danny sacrificing himself to save the little girl, who by now calls him Uncle Danny because they're so connected, because they have The Shining. The Shining unites them. They're like family, even though they're not blood family, blood relatives. Or are they? We don't know. Well, according to our biology, they're not, but according to supernatural biology, they are relatives. So his spirit comes to talk to her at the end, and she deals with phantoms and ghosts on her own in the future because there's going to be more of these vampire type of creatures to hunt down. The Overlook Hotel gets this wonderful revisitation towards the end of at the actually very end of the movie, and that is the whole movie is worth those 4 shots really, because reliving that moment in the hotel again really caused something and made me feel a lot. But everything else did not work. It did because it doesn't add anything new to what Kubrick already delivered. I had this fear when I went into the movie thinking, seeing the visuals, I have the feeling that what the creators are trying to do here is mix the visuals of Kubrick with the actual book of Stephen King. Because what Kubrick did in the 80s, he didn't follow the plot line of Stephen King, and hence the problems that arose with Stephen King not really being in favor of the way Kubrick portrayed the story. But you know how it is, egos and jealousy, egos always play a big role. Stephen King was probably liked the movie, but was probably upset by the fact that the movie was maybe more successful than the book. But then hey, that's what you get. Kubrick was quite upset that Jack Nicholson got way more publicity out of this movie than actually Kubrick did, because Kubrick, he always wants to be on top of things, but also wants to be the center of attention, which is one of the reasons why he shot a horror movie to begin with back in the 80s, because a lot of horror movies were coming out and there was a lot to be said about them, and then he wanted to always prove, his own point and be like, okay, horror is a good thing. I'm gonna give it my stamp of approval and my particular take on horror and take that world. And he did a great job with it. So it's interesting how, Stephen was upset. Probably the most upset aspect of him being upset is the ego, being the fact that Stanley's The Shining was, and still is today, way more successful and better than the book The Shining. Kubrick was upset that Jack Nicholson got more famous out of this than he did. Shelley was upset because Jack got way more attention than her in the movie, and not just that, but also, as we all know, Shelley Duvall suffered psychologically a lot of distress after the movie. Kubrick did not treat her in the best of ways during the filming. So, but anyway, we have all this richness, this texture, this layered, incredible amount of information and inspiration that The Shining delivers. And now we have Dr. Sleep. So what does Dr. Sleep add on top of what we already know and feel and have already experienced? Nothing. That's the big problem. So why go for it? Why make a movie like this if it's not going to deliver anything new? It was quite frustrating to watch, really, because of the tackiness of it. And it was also painful to watch because, when you, at one point when Jack Torrance is now a ghost in the Overlook Hotel and he is now the barman, right? And now here's the connection to Danny towards the mid part of the movie when he's a grown up, and he tells that doctor guy that his watch was lost somewhere, blah, 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 and then he gets a job. The interview for the job is in a room that is exactly the same as the office in the Overlook Hotel where his father had the interview. So this is where we first get an idea that there's going to be more parallels between him and his father. Of course, Danny is an alcoholic and he's struggling with alcoholism. Well, that's what his father also went through. And this is an interesting topic that Stephen King touches upon. And this is quite often happens. Kids whose parents are alcoholics, they also go, fall victims to alcoholism or become sick of it because it is a disease. So how does the payout for this, for us seeing him in the office at the beginning, that is a copy of the Overlook Hotel? Well, because at the end, all of a sudden, Danny takes the part of his father. That was painful to watch for me in a way. So he's at the bar in the golden room, and all of a sudden, the barman now is his father. And here's the twist, So the father is now trying to offer him that drink, trying to make him want to drink again. But Danny resists. But we see how they cast an actor. Again, it looks like a character study for Halloween. It doesn't really work. And then Jack Torrance is showed from the profile as he's talking. Cringy. Then when they have a frontal view of him, that's where I felt like there was a CGI moment there. They tweaked him to just mimic more Jack Nicholson's facial features. But anyway, at the end of the day, Ewan McGregor, great choice. Casting was great. The little girl also, she was really cute. Had good energy, good vibes. She was very independent. She could hold her own ground. But everything else was... And again, this is for somebody who loves The Shining. Now, if you've never watched Kubrick's Shining, if you've never watched it and you haven't experienced the magic of The Shining, and Dr. Sleep is the first movie in this saga, if you want, that you watch, you might like it, or if you're not so much into horror movies or into psychological thrillers or family dramas, then you might like this. But if you already know everything that Kubrick delivered to us, through The Shining, then Dr. Sleep is a huge, huge disappointment. There you have it, guys. One positive thing, positive, not really that positive, but interesting little detail for those of you who follow me, my channel in general. I know that it's also about fashion. Regency Village Theater, show it again, has two sides to it, but one of the sides is where Quentin Tarantino shot Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, the scene where Sharon Tate walks into the cinema with a Chanel bag. You could actually, by the way, check out in the card section, also in the link down below in the description box underneath this video, you can check my review of Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But what is so fascinating is that Sharon Tate in the movie walks into the theater with this bag, the Chanel 2.55 bag. And this is the actual version of it that she walks in with. So I had it on. I went to the theater with this bag. It was just like a little weird memento, wearing the carpet of the Overlook Hotel and having the Sharon Tate Chanel number 255 bag walking into the theater, where actually Margot Robbie entered and was shot by Tarantino, shot with the camera, filmed, sitting in the theater watching herself. So there was a lot of like mirroring for me going on tonight. That was really fascinating. But anyway, go watch it. Make up your own minds, guys. For me, it's a no-go. No-go. Thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already but wish to consider subscribing to my channel here on YouTube, I'm also on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, Super Dacob, all spelled together. By the way, I would also like to thank my Patreons. I'm also on Patreon, Super Dacob, all spelled together, for helping out. Without you, the channel would not exist. Thank you guys so much. Never forget to never give up on love. Love you. See you soon.